If we need to do any volume adjustments on the mics, like we need to. All right. I mean, on the fly.
Sure. It's not. I don't do it in here.
Yeah.
For the yeah. I'll just run up there.
And honestly, you know, other than EQ, those are. Other than EQ, if it's just pure volume, you do it those knobs right here if you want. If you're right accessible.
Test. Check our feed. Make sure it's.
Matt, do you have any more tape?
Yeah, should we get after this one? So. Oops. Bad throw.
Check, microphone check. Testing. Check, microphone check. Testing, testing. Sure, these mics are going. Oh, yeah, we'll just put it back on that coming up screen.
As long as we're setting it. Because we can trim that off later.
Check, check, microphone check.
No.
Check, microphone check. Testing, testing. Test, test. Testing, testing. Test, test. Check, microphone check. Testing, testing, feed.
So if you could find your places, please. We'll start in 1 minute. Tom, you ready? All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. My name is Bob Woodward, and I'm the Vice President of Community Media for Woodward Communications, the publisher of the TH and TH Media. And I want to thank you all for coming to our second installment of our Make Dubuque Better Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion series. This is the second in 7. And tonight we're going to talk about workforce development and economic well-being. Last month we got this kicked off here at Steeple Square with the topic of housing, and we had a great crowd that night. We had a great panel, some good discussion, and we uncovered a lot of issues, and we also uncovered some resources and some potential next steps. That's our goal again tonight. I want to start by thanking our sponsors, without whom this would not be possible. So our lead sponsor tonight is Greater Dubuque Development Corporation, and we'll be hearing from Rick Dickinson in a minute. So we really appreciate them. We have 6 other sponsors I want to mention. NICC, Northeast Iowa Community College, Hodge Companies, Cottingham and Butler, Dubuque Area Chamber of Commerce, John Deere, and Green State Credit Union. I also want to let everybody know that we are live streaming and recording this evening. So if you want to watch from home, or if you're watching from home, welcome, thank you. And if you want to watch later or tell somebody about it, they can watch it later on telegraphherald.com. I want to be clear, kind of set expectations a little bit, and what our goals are for this evening. We're looking to get the conversation started, and we're specifically going to be talking about workforce development and economic well-being. Our goal is to talk about some of the issues and factors, but we probably won't hit them all. You might have something in mind that we don't touch on, and that's okay, because we're just getting started tonight. We also want to document and illustrate some of the issues and the factors involved. Again, probably won't hit them all. Some of those will be quantitative, and you'll hear about those in a few minutes from Alex Baum. And then we'll also have some qualitative examples, some firsthand experiences, some lived experiences and viewpoints. The goal tonight is to spark a conversation. So you have a role as well. Your role is ask questions. Your role is to, if you want to, contribute an experience, an idea, or opinion. Mostly we're going to be hearing from the panel, but if you have some thoughts on this, or if you have a question for the panel, please chime in. Our facilitators will be happy to visit with you. You will notice that there are some index cards and some pens on the tables. If you have a question that you want to be addressed by the panel, go ahead and jot those down, and Amy and Anderson will grab those and share those if you don't feel comfortable asking it live. And then lastly, your role is to participate in some of the upcoming community conversation sessions, and you'll be hearing a little bit more about that in a minute. So our goal is to identify some resources, both for employers and employees, and also identify some action items and next steps that we can move ahead with after tonight and take action on leaving this evening. What we're going to try not to do or not be able to do is hit every facet, every experience, every idea, or every example. And we're not going to be able to identify every single resource and provide every answer, but we're going to get started tonight. So first of all, I want to welcome our lead sponsor here to kick off the evening and share with you a few thoughts from the Greater Dubuque Development Corporation, Rick Dickinson.
Thank you, Bob. First of all, I'd like to thank our partners at the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque and TH Media for sponsoring and making this conversation possible. I greatly appreciate it. And the co-sponsors along with Greater Dubuque Development that have funded this opportunity to share information. Now I know the acoustics are not the best in here, so it's bad enough to hear me once instead of hello, 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 it's Rick, 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 Rick. So I'll try to overcome that a little bit, and I know it's just like church because it once was, because everyone's sitting in the back instead of in the front. So let me just first say this. On behalf of the board of directors, the investors, and the staff at Greater Dubuque Development Corporation, I want to thank everyone responsible for this event, but most importantly, I'd like to thank you for taking time from your busy schedules to discuss these issues. Many of you were here a few weeks back, and I hope you stay with us through this process to try to understand each other better and to better understand the challenges we face as a community. Where do we stand in Dubuque right now as it relates to workforce? The latest data we had was Tuesday of last week, and it told us that in August, 58,700 people worked in Dubuque County, regardless of where they lived. About 54,000 of those folks actually live and work in Dubuque County. The rest is a commute population into Dubuque County. That's 500 more than a year ago, August of 2021, showing progress. That's 1,500 people less than August of 2019, the last August pre-pandemic. 15,000 people, as we speak, identify themselves as unemployed looking for work in Dubuque County. Of those 1,500 who are unemployed looking for work, only 251 are receiving unemployment benefits. I saw a gubernatorial campaign ad just last night, and one of the banners on the ad was, "We need to stop paying people to not work." Isn't it interesting how we always look down instead of up to identify what the causes of our problems are in our society and in our communities? Unemployed receiving unemployment compensation is not the cause of the workforce shortage. The pandemic is not the true cause of the workforce shortage. It accelerated what many of us have been fearing for nearly a decade, because we are in the midst of a new word. We know what endemic means. We know what certainly pandemic means. The new word is sansdemic, without people. More to the point, without enough people. We face perhaps the greatest challenge of our lifetime as it relates to economic and community development. Certainly the issues we'll discuss tonight will be one of the greatest issues that our children and our grandchildren will face. And it's about people. It's caused by the fact that we have the lowest birth rate today in our nation's history. It's caused by the fact that baby boomers are stepping out of the workforce, you're looking at one, in groves, from key positions with decades of experience. These issues don't go away and they can't be fixed by any one thing, but three things that can be immediate fixes temporarily are upskilling the unemployed and underemployed population, migration, being a community of choice so that we rob Peter to pay Paul, and lastly, and one of the conversations I hope we enter into tonight, is immigration. 90% of the population growth in the United States of America between today and 2065 will come from immigration. Let me repeat that. In the United States of America, 90% of our population growth will come from immigration. Where do we stand on that? How welcoming of a community do we live in? How does diversity, equity, and inclusion come into the mix of how do we make sure we have the talent we need? Because if we don't have the talent that we need, every employer, every school, every college, every family's economic prosperity will be challenged. Thank you for coming, and I'll turn it over to whoever's next.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, the bottom line is it's a numbers game. We need people. And the next speaker actually is going to share some data with you. And I want to take a quick second and just thank the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque. Nancy Van Milligan, Bobby, Mary Jo, Clara, Alex, Jeff. I'm missing people, and I apologize for that, but have been incredible partners in this. This is a joint effort, and they are going to be running with this a lot in some of our community conversations going forward. It's up to you to participate in those, and we're very grateful to be partnering with the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque. To share some data and illustrate this issue a little bit more, please welcome Alex Baum from the Community Foundation.
Thank you very much, Bob. Really appreciate TH Media for hosting this event and putting this on and allowing us to have this beginning part of the conversation around economic well-being, workforce, around jobs in our community. Also, a big thank you to Rick and to GDDC for all of their support for this. Rick, great points. I couldn't agree with you more. Just quickly, to talk a little bit more about the process for these conversations. Like Bob had mentioned before, at the beginning of each month, we are going to be tackling a different topic that is important for our community. And we want to do that by presenting data and by having experts and knowledgeable people with lived experience from the community come to be able to talk to you. But that is not where the conversation is going to end. Perhaps the more important part of it is where we host community conversations and send out a community survey to be able to get input from the community, from all of you, from everyone else here, because we feel like that is the ideal way that we can get a full picture of what the reality is in our community and what the best direction is going forward. And at the end of each month, we are going to compile all of that data, all of that input into some community snapshots that we will then share back with the community, so you can have hear a little bit about what people have been saying around these topics. And what are the topics, you might ask? Well, we have already covered housing, and right now we're working on workforce and economic well-being. You can see the list that we have coming up. In November, or next month, we'll be discussing education. So we please ask you to stay engaged and to continue to come back to cover each of these topics, because they're all very important. Now, part of what we talked about before was being able to present a little bit of the quantitative data in order to help frame this conversation. A few notes that I want to give about this data. First of all, we're very interested in being able to compare with our previous community equity profile, which was done 7 years ago in 2015. So we want to look at how we as a community have changed, how we have progressed, where we have had success, and where we have had failures that we need to look at. We are also focusing on equity here. We want to try to be able to break down these numbers so that we see how different populations within our community are disproportionately impacted by the elements that we're talking about. That's going to be a key focus of this data. And the final thing that I'll bring up is that you may notice the colors are kind of orange and blue. We are doing those to try to be colorblind friendly. So hopefully that is helpful to people. But if you do have questions about the data, if it's hard for you to see, we have the data up to the side here. and please feel free to reach out to me and I'd be more than happy to share it with you. So let's start by talking a little bit about poverty rates here in the city of Dubuque. And I'm going to just start by very quickly showing what this data is meaning. So the darkest lines that you will see are for the percentage of the population living on less than 50% of the poverty rate. The medium line is less than 100%, and then the lightest line will be less than 125% of the poverty rate. The blue on the left side is going to be the previous equity profile, and the orange on the right side is going to be the current data. So let's start by looking at poverty rate broken down by gender. As you can see, there are some definite disparities here between men and women, but in general, we have seen progress in most of these areas between the last profile and now. There is an exception, though, and that is women who are living below 50% of the poverty line, which has actually grown during that time. Now, some additional data that we have found is that for all of the families in the city of Dubuque living below the poverty line, nearly 2/3 of them are single mothers, are women-led households without a spouse present. Vast majority of those have children in that household. So this is really something very important, I think, that stands out from this data and from what I've seen. Let's now talk about poverty and age. So here, again, you can see the breakdown for children, people under 18 years of age, 18 to 64 years, and 65 years and older. One thing that I want to call out here is the higher rates that we have for childhood poverty than for the other demographics set up here. You can see that these numbers on the top part are generally higher, and it's a bigger proportion. It also speaks again to that discussion we had about single moms, because if that is a demographic that we reach, that also significantly impacts childhood poverty. Moving along, here is poverty rate by race and ethnicity as well for the city of Dubuque. Now, just to recap, it is going to be the same data layout, the previous profile on this side, the current data on your right side. If we break out a couple of these, we can see, excuse me. So one thing that I noticed was a significant drop for poverty rate for our Latino population. Now, there could be a lot of discussions around that, whether or not the data was able to pick up our Latino population as well. But part of me is very hopeful that this number represents real progress for our community with this specific population. I've also pulled out our Pacific Islander population and our Marshallese population, in part to show that the number on the left side, I believe, is partially due to poor data by the census. I'm afraid that back in 2013, when this data was collected, the census probably didn't have a very good grasp around the number of people within our Pacific Islander community, which has been borne out by the experience of a lot of our nonprofit organizations. So I feel the numbers on the right are probably more reflective of that. Those numbers on the right are concerning, with nearly 67% of the population living below the poverty line, according to this data from 2020. And finally, I want to call out our Black population, where we have seen progress for individuals living below 100% of the poverty line, but also regression for those living below 50% of the poverty line. And even when we talk about progress from the last report, I think most of us can agree that these numbers aren't acceptable. And this should be something that we really pay attention to as we move forward. Let's also talk about household income levels, and some of the breakdown here. I'm going to start here in the top left corner, and we're going to work around counterclockwise. So this was the median household income in the city of Dubuque, and you can see some of the change that we have seen in the last 7 years. When we break this down by gender, you can see that there are significant disparities. Now, this is median earnings right now for individuals who work full-time, year-round workers. And you can see that while there has been progress, there is still a lot of disproportionate effects between men and women right now. And then when we look at it broken down by race and ethnicity, there are a couple of different numbers here that might stand out to you, that might jump out. I want to call out specifically the number for our Black community, which there was no 2020 data, so this is 2019 data, but the median household income is sitting at just above $12,000. Now, one additional point that I want to bring out here is talk a little bit about the difference between median income, household income, and per capita income. Median household income is when you line up all the households and find the one that is exactly in the middle, which can be really useful because if you have Bill Gates living in your community, it doesn't skew all the incomes up too high. Another way of looking at this is per capita income, where you take the total income for all individuals and then divide it by the number of individuals to see what that is. The reason I bring this up is because you see some very different results when you look at it this way. You may notice that, for example, for our white population, per capita income is about $32,500. Some of the numbers, like some other race and two or more races, have dropped significantly. The one that I want to pull out specifically is our Pacific Islander population, which has a median household income of $34,000, but a per capita income of just over $6,000. That's probably because many of our Marshallese community members live in multi-generational households, where you might have a number of different incomes being there, but also a lot more people living for that income. So we wanted to call this out to make sure that we weren't missing any different facets of poverty within our community. Next, let's look at unemployment rate broken down by rate and ethnicity. Now, I want to say that these numbers are taken from the census data from 2020, and so are not reflective of our sub-3 unemployment rate from this August, right? Right now, we have about a 2.8% unemployment rate, and so a lot of these numbers are not exactly representative of this. However, I think they may be useful in showing our progress since the previous equity report, and many of the disparities between racial and ethnic groups are still representative of what we would see right now if we surveyed the entire population. So calling out a couple of these numbers specifically, you can see that we've seen a significant degree of progress since the last equity profile. Drops in unemployment for our Asian, Latino, our female population. The same for Pacific Islanders and what is classified as some other race within the census. All of these are signs of progress. However, not all of the news is rosy. With our Black population, we have seen a significant amount of growth. And I think we should be aware of both this unemployment rate for the Black population and for our Pacific Islander population, because these are significantly high and seem to indicate that there are barriers to getting employment for members of these communities. Looking now at unemployment rate by educational attainment. So this is looking at what the unemployment rate is for individuals who have less than a high school degree, have a high school degree or an equivalency, have some college or an associate's degree, or have a bachelor's degree or higher. And you can see since the previous profile, we have seen drops in the unemployment rate for all of these categories, except for those with some college or associate's degree. And then finally, this is a graph showing the workforce composition for the city of Dubuque right now, broken down on the top by race and ethnicity, and on the bottom by gender. Now we're going to focus in on this section right here, which is kind of our non-white section of the workforce. And you can see right here how some of this is broken down, and there's some very interesting numbers. For example, since the last community equity profile, the percentage of the workforce made up by our Black community and our Pacific Islander community has more than doubled during that time. And we would expect those trajectories to continue into the future. Thank you very much for looking at this. We want to go into this conversation a little bit more. And again, if there are any questions about this, please come and find me, and don't hesitate to ask, because while this data is very compelling, it is not perfect. And there's a lot of other areas to be able to explore here. So right now I want to turn it back over to Amy, and she can take it away with the panel.
Thank you. I'm Amy Gilligan. I'm the executive editor at the Telegraph-Herald. Happy to be with you all tonight. And we want to bring up our panelists. So panelists, if you'd like to come up and take these chairs. Chad, Eddie, come on up.
And while we're getting the panels up here, Anderson Sancy with the City of Dubuque, what we asked each and every single one of you to do, we do have some note cards on the table. Now is a great time to begin to jot some of those questions that you may have with what Mr. Dickinson said earlier, and also with what Alex just showed us with the data. So any question or thoughts you may have, please begin to jot those down. And I believe we're going to start off with some introductions so that the audience know who's here.
Thanks, Anderson. My name is Mark Dixon. I'm the general manager at John Deere Dubuque Works. I've lived here in Dubuque for 7 years.
Hi, I'm Chad Bank. Hi, I'm Chad Banky. I'm with Banky Enterprises. We're a trailer manufacturer out of Farley, Iowa, and I work a lot on the administrative side, human resources, and purchasing in the office. And then to the left of me, this is Eddie Olan, and he is one of our employees.
Hello, my name is Eddie Olan Cordova. I am from Mexico, and I work for Bank Enterprises in Farley. I am working for 8 months, and this is the best experience.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gisela Aiken-Shadle. I'm the Chief of Equity and Human Rights for the City of Dubuque.
Hi, I'm Adriana Johnson. I am a college and career coach at NICC. I've been here for 11 years, originally from Chicago.
Dear Littleton, Director of Equity for, Dear Littleton, Director of Equity for the Dubuque Community School District.
Are you able to hear us in the back? Looks good? Okay, thank you. All right, to start out, maybe we'll start with you, Mark, and anybody who wants to comment on this is welcome. We want to hear, just tell us a little bit about some of the obstacles your business faces when it comes to workforce.
Yeah, very good, Amy. I think first I'll just talk a little bit about what we do. We make construction and forestry equipment. Of course, Deere, we have two main divisions, ag and turf and construction and forestry. And I think just like what you see in many other aspects of your life, technology is driving the world. And just like battery electric vehicles and more sensors on your car and more sensors in your home, these kinds of things are affecting us as well, and our customers want more productivity and more sustainability in the long run. So we have to build this in, and we have to do it fast in order to feed and house and clothe the world. And in order for that to happen, you've got to have a lot of different perspectives, and I think that's just the essence of it. You can't recruit from the places you recruited before. You're going to not get the diverse kind of perspectives, whether it's ethnic, age, gender, just diversity in thought, sexual orientation. All those things really matter. And so for us, being in Dubuque, Iowa, Rick and Alex talked about, this problem is real. It's real everywhere. The work, workforce shortage, but it's worse in places in the Midwest. right? So here we are in Dubuque, and so we're going to have to embrace these things. So it's a critical portion for us to be successful. First off, there's two things I want to talk about. That would be attracting and then retaining employees. And from the attraction standpoint, we've revised a number of our recruiting processes to take the best leverage, have the best leverage in the space that we do business. And it takes a broad spectrum of talent. So we've looked at a number of things, whether it's human intervention. Oh, sorry. Thanks for, my ears aren't the best, I guess. So human intervention or technological intervention. So one example of technological intervention is accessDubuqueJobs.com. We leverage those tools to pinpoint different types of talent across not only the U.S., but in other places as well. And then on the human side, which we have to own this. You know, it's one thing to just think you can just rely on recruiters to go out and find the talent or leverage even the technology. To some degree, we have to get more involved. We have to work with our recruiters. We have to expose them to different ways of thinking, because doing the same thing over and over and over again, you know what that does. It's not going to get different results. And then the final thing I think would be going back to retaining employees. We've changed a lot of our processes to be more equitable. Make sure that we have the representation in our processes, such as, interviewing, such as leading projects, such as getting out into the community and representing our company, making sure that we have the representation that we want and that diverse perspective, or nothing's probably going to change. So changing some of those processes, but all in the lens of, equity. Always challenging ourselves from a standpoint of equity and inclusion, making sure that we're evaluating and making sure that we propose new ideas. So one of the big things that we try to engage with is our employee resource groups. And I think these are just critical. It gets us out into the community. It helps people establish themselves. And especially when people come into Deere, they have a group that they can connect with and get to know our community, get to know our company, and get to know the people in our community as well. So those are just a few things, but it's a challenge, and we have to open our minds to a broader perspective on how to deal with this. And we can't just wait for somebody to solve the problem. We have to actively engage at a much higher level, including yours truly, John Deere. So thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Does anybody else want to speak to this? That's okay. We can keep going. I'd like to hear any of you talk about any programs or tools that maybe local, state, federal that you might be familiar with that could help address some of these workforce issues that Mark has highlighted. Has anybody had any experience with that?
So one program that we've experienced some success with at our banking enterprises is we've utilized a TN Visa program. So basically what the TN Visa program is you're getting 4-year college university students who are engineers. In many cases, ours are coming from Mexico. So they're highly qualified, highly talented people. And one thing we found is it's just very difficult. The people pool just isn't here right now at the moment. So we kind of looked ahead and thought we have to get creative and find these qualified applicants. So we've been utilizing that program for about 9 months at this point, and it's been working out really well for us so far. Every employee that we've had, we've been very pleased with. They're highly qualified, they're trained. They can, come in, very intelligent, can learn all sorts of types of jobs. So it's really been working out great for us so far. We plan to keep utilizing this program, and the thing is, it just kind of comes down to the employee pool is just shrinking. We're all fighting, Rick was saying before, over, 1,500 people, and we know how busy Dubuque is. There's a lot of great things happening in this area, a lot of great industries, new industries moving in, so I think kind of collectively we need to find different types of ways because we're fighting over the same pool, and long term it's just not sustainable. We're just stealing each other's employees, so we need new talent coming into this area, whether it's from immigration or other areas. I know one thing Greater Dubuque has been kind of focusing on is bringing people back to this area that maybe they moved away for college and might moved away for 10 years or so, but they want to raise their families in Dubuque. It is a great area to be, so I think bringing that outside talent pool is really crucial to this area, I would say.
Thank you. Before we jump to, I want to hear from Gisela and others about some of those programs, but I want to hear from Eddie since Chad brought that up. So Eddie, you have one of those jobs that Chad was talking about. Can you tell us a little about what it's like for you working at Benki?
Okay. Yeah, it's a great experience. Working Benki Enterprises is it's like a dream that the Latino we have. So they are making me like his family. So they are looking for that we are comfortable. So and they are looking for we feel like a home. So we are far from Mexico, but they are making feel like if we be with our families.
Thank you, thank you. All right, jumping back to other programs, Gisela, I think you had an idea there.
Sure. So Benki is just one of the examples to bring immigrants to this area. The TM visa is the opportunity to bring immigrants with a position of status legally to work in the country for up to 3 years, and it can be renewed. This opportunity has actually brought a whole different atmosphere to Benki, I would say, and they have about 34 people, Chad, correct? Yeah, 34, and Eddie is just one of them. They do have their engineers. They are industrial and maintenance engineers, chemical engineers, and they speak some English. And then that collaborates with, thank you, that collaborates with NICC. So NICC has a program in which they can provide customized training, help do on-the-job training, as well as help them learn English and improve their English in this case so that they can be integrated better into the society and work and make Dubuque their home. There's also a great hidden gem with John Deere. John Deere also brings people from Mexico and from other countries, and they have also teamed in the past with NICC to provide equitable English language opportunities. Then you can also think of partnering up with organizations like Presentation Lantern, which are more one-on-one tutoring opportunities. And the community keeps growing. It's an idea of how do we get creative? How can we bring the workforce that we need into our community? I am not a Dubuquer. I came to the United States when I was 9 years old, and I have made Dubuque my home in the last 14 years. And I would tell you that I took a short leave for a year, or maybe 9 months, and I came back. You know why? Because Dubuque is a hidden gem. It has a lot of character, a lot of charisma, a lot of empathy, and a lot of opportunities that people in Latin America and Europe would like to work here. So I would encourage those that are here today, that are business owners, and that are looking for workforce to fulfill those positions that are empty, to contact people like Benki, contact NICC, contact other people that can help. The colleges also have a great opportunity. They bring students that are international students, and those international students don't want to return back to their home. They want to stay. There's another program, the occupational job training, that people can go ahead and make and extend the opportunity to work here. So think about it. You're not alone. It is a process, but the retribution that your business will get in return is extremely high, and the Dubuque Community School District is ready to jump in, and many other organizations.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I know that we talked about resources that we're using to get creative and innovative in our approach. But what the Dubuque Community School District is doing is looking at the system in itself first, right? It's one thing to say we want to recruit people, but it's another when we talk about the retention and the matriculation of staff, especially when we think about our BIPOC population, right? And so we have to assess that system first that speaks truth to power, right? How are we looking at our data analytics to make informed decisions that then in turn require us to be intentional and innovative with not only just recruitment, but that retention piece, right? And so one of those initiatives that we're doing not only is looking at all those pieces, but we're working with an organization who has access to over 100 historically black colleges and universities. And what we know to be true there is that not only are we expanding our outreach regionally, but we're looking across the nation to how do we diversify our workforce to where we see the alignment of our student demographics align with our staff demographics, right? And not only that, but how are we leveraging those resources that we're using to make equitable, informed decisions as we talk about retention, and how do we incentivize what that looks like for people who may not necessarily be a part of the majority?
Dear, I want to add on to that, and I'm curious for anybody, Mark, Chad, also, as we're talking about recruiting a diverse group of individuals to our organizations and how do we retain them, is your organization doing anything specific or targeting to make sure that these individuals not only feel included within the organization at all levels, but feel that they can be their authentic self? Are you guys doing anything specifically in the organization?
Yeah, I can tie into that. I mean, I think one of the things is we heavily encourage our employees to, as we talked about before, the resource groups, because those are available. The Multicultural Center is a spot that we target. And of course, what do we call it? Distinctively Dubuque. Thanks, Rick. It was about to jump out. But Distinctively Dubuque is a great introduction into this community. And we almost require, we don't mandate it, but we highly, highly encourage it. And I think recent feedback was that some of the teams that we've sent have been some of the most diverse groups that have gone through that training. So to really feel the community and be part of it. But I think it's going back to some of the other comments is, I think as an organization, all of the businesses and in this community have to do extra things, take extra time to really make people feel comfortable. This is a great community, but it maybe sometimes feels a little nichey and a little cliquey when you first get here. So you really have to go and get to know people and just feel the warmth. And that's not going to happen unless we actively as employers, try to get out and introduce them. I've leveraged many of you in this room times before when we brought new employees to just reach out and get to know our new people so they feel welcome. Because I think that's just like we heard many of the panelists already say, once you get here and you get established, you love it. But you don't get that right away. I mean, that's just the way it is when you move into a community, so no matter where it is. And so I think in today's world, where we're trying to bring people from all aspects of our nation and across the world to this community, it's not going to be done the same way we've done it before.
Yeah, and without taking up too much space, right, one of the things that I want to point out to piggyback on that is when we think about equity in the workforce specifically, what we know to be true about equity is that equity is about meeting people where they are, giving them what they need, when they need it in order to be successful, right? And so one of the things that we're trying to do to diversify that experience is to really think about what trainings are we doing to move staff along on the spectrum when we think about diversity, belonging, and inclusion and equity? And how are we meeting people where they are to be intentional to bringing them along that journey, right? When you think about inclusivity, right, that's one of those things like I have to feel like I matter, that I'm valued to be a part of that space or to feel like I belong in this community, right? And how are we leveraging that to make people feel like this is a place not only where you can survive, but you can thrive in doing that to become more competent in whatever it is that you desire and feel like you have a community of people helping you lead that work. And that's super important when doing this work.
I think sometimes we tend to go ahead and focus on hiring for cultural fit, but it's not about hiring for cultural fit. It's about hiring for cultural add. What is this individual, even though they look different, They talk different. They have different skills. What are they going to add to my company? How am I going to benefit? What's going to make them more unique? What are their talents that they're going to bring to me and to my workforce? Because it's not about cultural fit. If we focus on cultural fit, then we seem to have the tendency as a human nature to hire for people that look like us, talk like us, act like us. But we need to change that fixed mindset into a growth mindset and see how can we grow together. What can we value and learn from one another to take our businesses to the next level, our community to the next level.
I'd like to hear from Adriana. Now, you're a recent college graduate. Tell us a little bit about your experience in trying to find a position in the workforce, and tell us what you think employers might be able to do to build a more diverse and inclusive workplace.
Okay, so not too recent, 2015. So I've been out of college for quite some time now. But it was hard for me initially after graduating to break into my field. I am a psychology major, and so getting into that human services world, it was very tough, even with the educational background. Literally, I got into that world by somebody lending a hand up because it was just almost impossible to get into that field and get into these higher paying positions, even with the educational background and even with my experience. And that has been my story for quite some time now. Even more recently this year, in applying for a lot of these positions, it was just no, 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 and I've been doing it for a lot of years now. So I definitely have the experience and I have the educational background, but I do feel like, you know, being a black woman does play a part in if you're gonna be offered or even considered for some of these positions. And that's just been my story as a black woman. But speaking to what you were saying about the different skills and stuff, not only what skills do you bring to the table, but also representation matters. And so a lot of these businesses are serving people from diverse backgrounds, or these educational institutions or these school systems were serving people that look different. So why not have people that look different serving these people? I know just working in some of the school districts, it was like, you know, children that looked like me would get so excited when they saw me walk through the hallways, or when they saw other people that looked like them walk through the hallways, because it told them, hey, you know, maybe one day I could achieve this. Or seeing people on staff that look like them, it's so empowering and it's so important. So I just think having a room full of diverse people when we are making these decisions about people that come from different backgrounds, it's so very important.
Out of curiosity, as someone who works in local government, you know, we value having the employers here, the diversity here, but we also recognize there's things that at times is missing in the community to help each and every single one of you to retain the talent that you're bringing in. From your perspective, from your lens, what do you feel is missing to help retain the diversity that you have from an amenity standpoint? Go ahead.
Well, I would definitely say just that comfortability piece. Like a lot of times we may get the position, but you know, we're uncomfortable there. Just speaking personally, or you have to find one or two people that you can actually be your authentic self with. So sometimes it is, you know, it's just not a really welcoming environment. It doesn't feel inclusive. And so a lot of times we do transition to other positions just because, you know, this is where I'm at 8 hours of my day. I don't want to be uncomfortable there for 8 hours or have to put on a mask, you know, while I'm there, just because I don't feel like they see me or that I'm valued.
I would say for us, retaining, we're a family-owned business, and on the grand scheme of things, we're probably on the smaller end. We have about 180 employees. But within our business, it is a lot of family run and family operated. So I think one way we try and retain employees, we just try and make them, you know, kind of feel like an extended part of our family. You know, we try and treat them well, treat them like we would anybody in our family. have inclusive get-togethers, have meals with them, all those sorts of things to keep them around and make them feel like they are part of our family. Because at the end of the day, they are. We're business owners. We couldn't do it without our employees. We need them, and we owe, most of our success to them at the end of the day. So we just treat it as a family type environment and just try and extend that all the way through to the employees. And over the years, it seems like it's done a really good job of helping us retain our employees. We really don't do a ton of advertising in terms of new recruitment. A lot of it is just kind of a grassroots. We'll kind of put the word out to some of our employees, hey, we're looking, we could fill some positions. And it makes us feel really well that when we do that, apps kind of come in from family members of employees, cousins, friends, ex-coworkers, things of that nature, because it tells us at the end of the day that our employees feel like they're being included and that they enjoy working for us, so they feel like they can reference other people to work for us, because at the end of the day, they enjoy it, and it just makes us feel really good and kind of justifies that you're doing something right, and that when you're running it kind of as a family type of environment, you can be successful that way.
Let's build on that a little bit. I think listening to our employees is one of the key things. And I think Inclusive Dubuque, our equity cohorts, and some other things that we've done to actually get people that aren't from here and are now living here, and asking them what it's like. What was it like to go through the whole transition? What was hard? What was not so hard? One of the things we did at Dubuque recently, at John Deere Dubuque Works recently, is we started a grassroots, very diverse grassroots employee experience team. And they basically channel how well we're doing on building an experience within our walls. Now, the community is another challenge, but we got to work on what we can work on first. But within our walls, we're asking our employees, tell us what it's like to work here and tell us what we can do differently. And they are not only giving us lots of ideas to improve the experience, but they're also, we just finished an employee survey. We're going to ask them to analyze the survey and feed it to us rather than we're analyzing the survey. We're going to ask our employees to do it in this experience team. So just kind of flipping some things around to really do different things to make sure we're listening to their experience in our community.
Retention happens when you have built respect for each other's differences, when you have built a relationship of trust, a relationship of acceptance, a relationship of equity, not equality, but equity. Every single employer, just like every single human being here tonight, is different, but it all starts with respect. A relationship in which I value my ideas and you value my ideas and I value yours. A relationship in which I feel heard. I feel that there is no barrier of I can come to. Hello? Okay. In which I can come to you, you can come to me, and we're going to go ahead and have that frank conversation of this is my point of view, this is your point of view. Because people, it's human nature to want to feel inclusive. And inclusivity cannot be built without a frank conversation in which you value the talents that this person and you have as a team, as individuals, and that you're going to together build for the common good of the organization or the workforce.
Yeah, if I can add on to all of those great things that you all said, what I will say is two things when we talk about retention. What we have to look at is the system and the environment within the system, right? How are we creating an environment that fosters vulnerability for people to lean into that discomfort to do the necessarily self-implications, right? One of my favorite quotes says, vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage are never easy, but they're never weaknesses, right? And so how are we putting truth to power and staff voice to hear what they're saying and take that and put that into incorporating initiatives to circumvent some of those things that aid in retention? And I think that's so important.
I think we're going to take some questions from our audience here pretty quick, but let me ask one thing. So we've got a lot of people sitting out here who just showed up tonight because they care and they're concerned about this issue, and they may not be an employer, but for an average citizen of Dubuque who's concerned about this, what can an individual do to help foster that kind of culture that you're talking about for greater inclusivity, for a more diverse workforce? Anybody?
It's not about just doing the talk. It's about walking the walk. It's about partaking in events. It's not about having a nice fancy meal in which you're doing strategic planning and saying, okay, we're pro-diversity, we're gonna go ahead and bring a diversity workforce. It's how can you get involved? How do you go and meet? If you have to be intentional. If you wanna recruit Latinos, then start connecting with those Latino networks. If you wanna connect with the Black African American community, start attending those events. Start attending the NAACP, start attending the Black Men's Coalition, and make connections, meaningful connections of networking, and say, hey, I'm looking for X number of people that I want to recruit. And also start attending those events. People want to embrace you. People of color are not afraid to embrace other people that are not of color. We're here to learn from one another. And it's just partaking in events. There has been the Marshallese event that was happening last weekend. That was a great opportunity to connect with the Marshallese community. There's the Latinx Fiesta coming in this week. Let's connect with those. If you have to be around the people and surrounded with the people that you're looking for, not just post it in a website in which those people are not gonna read. Where do they read? Where are they? You gotta go to them. Don't wait for them to come to you.
Okay, now we've got a bunch of questions, so I'll start with one, and this is to do with employees with disabilities. So the ADA requires companies to set a goal of having a workforce at least 7% of employees with a disability. What are you and your workplace trying to do to be more inclusive in hiring people with disabilities?
I think there's two things I would say. First is understanding that disabilities some of them are visible and some are invisible. So I think opening up, and one of the things that we've tried to embrace is try not to get so focused on skills and talk more about competencies and experiences, and the skills, because the skills can be taught. And I think that opens up the door to a lot of, say, more a broader perspective on what you really need, and challenges some of those preconceived kind of ideas and more traditional ideas, which opens up for people with all kinds of maybe visible or invisible disabilities. So I think embracing that and not letting it be a real or perceived roadblock is something that we're trying to do. And obviously we try to make our facilities and everything equitable, and I think just more flexible in the way that we let people do work also helps with that.
Dear, is that something in the school district? Are there efforts to make the the employees of the district kind of reflect that, so that students with disabilities maybe see themselves reflected? Things like looking for, creating positions for people with disabilities, or looking for job training opportunities, on-the-job training.
Yeah, I'd say from my lens, not being in HR, more so equity, what I think is important is that we're looking at all our protected classes, right? We're finding innovative and intentional ways in which we can diversify our staff regardless of identities, and looking at those protected classes to seeing where we are, looking at the data to getting to where we need to be, and just having conversations with people at the table to make sure that we're including stakeholders who are a part of those communities to have those conversations. And it's a long journey, right? But I think we have to start somewhere in order to get the ball moving, and so I think that's our approach from the district.
I love this question right here. It's one of my students who put this down. A wise person once says, "Don't tell me what you value, show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value." Can you share a diversity and inclusion initiative you are currently pouring the most funds into? So either you or your organizations, what are you investing in when it comes to diversity and inclusion? Anyone?
Yeah, I would say, we take a look at all and any qualified applicants, and we don't look on a basis of an ethnicity, gender, anything of that nature. We just look at the applicant, bring them in for the interview, and rate them just on a person and a people basis. There's no, predetermined biases or anything like that we're going into it with. Open to everybody, and, it's all about inclusion. One question we got right away from a lot of our colleagues and people that had questions about our TN program when we started is, how was, the rest of your employees receiving it? How did the inclusivity of it all go? And one thing we've learned over the years, people they want to work with someone that's hard work and reliable, shows up, they don't care, gender, race, anything like that. They just want someone they can rely on, work around safely, and really at the end of the day, none of those maybe preconceived notions that some people may have really matter. It's all about the quality of the person at the end of the day.
Okay, do you want to answer that? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, good question. I wonder if I know who that wise person is. Right, but I think one of the things that we're doing at the district is putting resources in our training, putting resources in our hiring practice, looking at our recruitment, looking at our retention data. We're looking at resources not only in K through 12, but how are we leveraging that to be intentional with content leaders who are doing equity work for the district. And those are just some of the things that we're doing. We're doing trainings across the board for pre-K through 12 when it comes to equity, talking about intercultural communication, intercultural competence. How are we aligning those to be strategic, to meet those strategic priority initiatives that we set? And so those are just a few of the many ways in which we are leveraging equity in the Dubuque Community School District.
This one says, how is it possible to have a 2.8% unemployment rate in Dubuque County and still have nearly 30% of black persons unemployed? What can local employers do to tap into this resource, people of color, in our community? One more time. So yeah, so black unemployment much higher than unemployment in the county, the unemployment rate in the county. So what can employers do to tap into that resource to try to get more people of color, those applicants, into their workplace?
Well, it's unfair for me to jump in this space, but I will, and I want to piggyback off something Rick said earlier. When you consider the work that majority of African Americans do currently right now in our community, majority are low-wage jobs, right? And he mentioned earlier that the opportunity that we have is to skill African Americans up. And so within employers, there's a variety of programs that are out there to help individuals to earn and learn at the same time. And so we have to take advantage of those opportunities right now where you're connecting with those who work within your organization and asking them, what can we do to scale you up so that they can get those high-paying jobs. So that's one thing that I believe that every single person in here can do. If you're not in the organization, and let's just say you're a community member, what's your role to help people who are unemployed to get an opportunity at NICC, right? To get them meaningful job opportunities. And so each and every single one of us play a role to helping African Americans achieve success in a higher paying job.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, I think what's important is for us to look at our application process and see what barriers are created in our application and hiring practices, and then coupling that to have conversations with BIPOC population to see what are our areas of opportunities, and then how are we taking that and synthesizing that data to tell the story of where we are and to initiate some initiatives that then address those barriers for BIPOC people.
So the city of Dubuque has the Office of Shared Prosperity, which ironically Anderson sees it. And one of the things that they do is they go around the neighborhoods and build out those relationships with any members of the community. And that goes back to being intentional. Being intentional, building that relationship. So I am going to take a leap of faith and bargain to say that at least one of you, that at least every single one of you knows, has heard of someone that is looking for a job or is unemployed. And it's a very easy step that you need to do. Just build that relationship, find out the why, and connect them. Connect them to Anderson's office, to my office, to NICC, to Iowa Works, to Adriana. We can help you. And all we need is for you to get that person into our doors, and we'll help them figure out the next step. It could be an earn and learn model at the NICC. It could be connecting them through networks that we have, finding them the right fit, finding out what their talents are, getting them to do a career test so that they actually can say, you know what, I'm in the wrong field. I actually want to do this, and find out that there is opportunities to do a program in which they can upscale their skills. So please, make tonight meaningful, not just sit here and hear us talk about how great things are or what we can do, but do your part. I really encourage you and challenge you to go out and get connected with us.
One quick follow-up for you, Gisela. You differentiated before between equity and equality, and someone asked to explain what you mean by that difference.
So I wish I had a PowerPoint that I could show you. There is a great figure if you Google equity versus equality. Equality means providing the same resources to everyone. Equity means providing those resources so that people, regardless of their height or their differences, can see and get that same opportunity. The best way to explain it, picturing it, is imagine if you're trying to look through fences of a baseball field. I am 5'2". My husband is 6'4". If the fence is 5'8", my husband does not need a box to step on, but I might not need 1 or 2 boxes. I might need 3 or 4. And that is equity, because you're letting me see the same thing that my husband is seeing. Otherwise, you would have to provide, to be equal, to provide equality, you would have to provide him 4 boxes, so now he's seeing it at this level, and 4 boxes is just going to let me see it right above the fence line. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I think it's great, a great example. Equity is having this meeting here, right? Having this meeting here versus having it, maybe on the west end of town or down at the Grand River Center. Equity is recruiting where people are at, right? So going down and finding people where they're at. So don't expect those to come to you, right? You go to them. I think these are all the kind of things that you're talking about, and it will make a difference. So I think you said intentional. Equity doesn't happen unless you're intentional.
Another powerful question. Lack of exposure to diversity produces fear. How do we introduce diverse people to white Dubuque people? And I would probably add white spaces. Like, how do you help your diverse leaders navigate white people or white spaces? Do you want to answer that? So lack of exposure to diversity produces fear. How do we introduce diverse people to white Dubuque people? And I added, introduce your diversity to either white people or white spaces. Powerful question, whoever wrote that.
Okay. Sorry, I feel like I'm talking a lot. But when I think of that question, I think we treat it the same. It's like, for the Dubuque Community School District, what we know to be true is that our student demographic is more diverse than our staff population, right? And so instead of saying that you know, we know that, and there's nothing we can do about it. How are we engaging staff into conducive training that allows them to become competent or interculturally competent or multicultural competent or competent in their intercultural communication, right? Beyond the scope of just Black or Pacific Island, Marshallese, our Guatemalan students. And so that's what it's about. How are we creating meaningful and intentional trainings that brings people along the journey regardless of where they are, right? Equity, I like to think of it as a lifelong journey. I didn't wake up yesterday and say that I was an equity expert, right? That was a process for me. I had to really be intentional with what my goals were when I talked about diversity, inclusion, belonging, and equity, right? And how am I bringing people along that journey, right? I always tell people at my district, and I'm looking at 3 of them, I always tell people, how are we calling people in, right? Because when you call people in, there's a level of care associated with that, right? You exploit the behavior and not the person. But when you call people out, you exploit the person, but not the behavior. And so that's when our walls go up. And so how are we bringing people along the journey to do the necessary work when we think about diversity, belonging, inclusion, and equity?
I would say it's not really our job to go and bring that to you necessarily. Us as humans, anything that we want to know, well, most of us, you know, we're going to seek out the information. We're going to seek out the knowledge. So just like Gisela was saying, take that initiative and go to these community events, you know, that are being held, or when there are festivals and things like that happening in your community. Take initiative and go to these things and introduce yourself, and just take that time to learn about the culture of the people that you are working alongside.
This one says, our community is served by at least 8 local institutions of higher education whose student demographics vastly overrepresent the underrepresented populations in our workforce. What responsibilities do our colleges, employers, and community share in attracting and retaining that talent to learn, live, play, work in Dubuque, and stay here?
Yeah, it's really good. It's something that we've recognized. So we've opened the doors open to a bunch of part-time student employment. So we figure if they're here and they're started in college, maybe they're at UD or at Loras or something like that, and they're not from Dubuque, how can we make them get a connection and get a decent experience and opportunity early on, not after they graduate or right before they graduate, but maybe as a freshman part-time student. We've got work, we can teach them, and we find that we can work around their schedules, and so it's just something that we're embracing and finding. In some cases we get as much productivity out of part-time students as we do full-time. So I think it's a great opportunity, and hook them in early and they'll be more willing to stay.
I think it's a great opportunity for those career services that they offer in the colleges. I think there are some career services directors from the colleges here tonight, and work with them. Introduce yourselves and say, hey, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z. Here are my characteristics. Can we connect? Because there's always students, regardless of their age, regardless of what year, that are looking for those meaningful experiences. Just like those students don't know where to find you, well, maybe it's time for us to find them, and by connecting with the colleges.
All right, so we have one more question. And again, if we didn't get to your question, please leave your cards on the table. We still would love to read those and follow up on those. This is for each and every single one of you. When training for your job, did you have any diversity, inclusion workshops or bias training? And how are you managing problems that come up in an inclusive environment?
I'll go first. I was doing this work before I stepped into this role, and so my work revolved around being a DEI practitioner. And so I wasn't new to equity, rather I was new to K through 12 because my experiences are in higher education. And so I was able to take those skills and transfer them over to what I do now. And I'm constantly immersing myself to become more competent in diversity, belonging, inclusion, and equity. because that's something that's important when I think about my work as a professional and as a personal goal, right? How am I also moving along the spectrum to become more competent? And how am I encouraging and celebrating that to speak truth to power to other people, to bring them along in that journey? So I'd say I've been doing this work, just new to Dubuque.
I did have some diversity training in the past when I worked at the district and other jobs before that. However, I would point out that the problem with diversity training sometimes is that it doesn't come from a person from a diverse background. So a lot of times we do have maybe a white male teaching this course or doing this training, and a lot of times diversity training does need to be taught by the type of people that you are going to service. So in that training, a lot of things I feel like were skipped over that are important. We do need to talk about microaggressions. We do need to talk about implicit biases. We do need to talk about different cultures, different things within those cultures, hair, dance, food, language. You know, all of these things do need to be talked about because we keep talking about that retention piece and making sure that everybody there does feel included and they do feel comfortable. So I do feel like it does us a disservice when we skip past those things in a diversity training and still feel like we can make it an inclusive work environment.
I would echo what both of my colleagues have said, but I would also add that in the city of Dubuque, through my office, we are starting to go ahead and offer intercultural competency training to external partners in the city, but we're starting right now with internal. I also do know from working at NICC that they do offer a customized DEI, diversity, equity, inclusivity training as well. And I think it's exactly what was just said. We need to be intentional, and we also need to figure out who is the best person providing these trainings. If we want a perspective that's diverse, then we need to look for that presenter to be diverse.
All right, we want to be respectful of people's time here, and we wanted to allow a little time at the end for those of you here to connect with some of our panelists and each other. So we're going to wrap this up here, but please join me in thanking this panel. It's been amazing. Thank you so much.
And let's also hear it, in addition for the panel, let's also hear it for Amy and Anderson. I think they did a phenomenal job of facilitating our conversation tonight. So we wanted these to be actionable. We don't want to talk about next steps. First action. On a lot of your tables, you will see a QR code. That's a survey that the Community Foundation is doing. Please take a second, scan that. Take the survey now or tonight, tomorrow, whatever it is, but please take a look at that. Take a picture of it and follow up on that. That's one of the things you can do for a follow-up coming away from tonight's conversation. Some takeaways. We promised to identify resources. We promised to identify some potential actions. I'm going to list you some of the ones that I wrote down. I hope you got some of the same ones, maybe some others. Rick talked about 3 areas: upskilling, migration, and immigration. 90% of the population growth is going to come from immigration. This is a numbers game. We don't have enough people. We didn't have enough people before the pandemic. It made it worse. A bunch of baby boomers, him, me, we're all retiring. So we've got to be open to and recruit and be intentional. Go out and find new people and welcome them to our community. We've got a challenge with female-led households, especially black households. That's an area that could be addressed in Dubuque. We need to work really hard at recruiting in addition to Access Dubuque Jobs, which is used. We also need to go out and look and recruit at historic black colleges and universities and other places and welcome them here to Dubuque. We also have this huge group of people who are in higher ed. A lot of them are not from Dubuque. They come here, they go to school. We want to keep them. We need to keep them. And we need to keep them whether they are black, white, or whatever diverse group they are. We need to keep folks in higher ed here in Dubuque once they come to school here. We talked about retention and interviewing, letting them lead projects, letting them represent. Important to have them represent your organization and represent out in the community. Employee resource groups we heard about from John Deere, the TN Visa program that we heard about from Banky, and that might not be a fit for you, but what could you do that's similar to that? We talked a little bit about hiring for cultural add, not for cultural fit. A lot of times our company can be this way. We're always looking for cultural fit. How about if we look at what they can bring to the table that's a little bit different, that would be in addition to our current culture? We talked a little bit about treating folks like family. Look at the application process. Are there any barriers in the application process that we have right now? They talked about the employee experience team. Hiring less for skills and more for competencies and experience is another great takeaway that we can do. And also that upskilling program where people earn while they learn was another good example. Calling people in rather than calling people out. And, if I had been on the panel, I would have added my 2 cents. And I think maybe, Adriana said it's not her job necessarily, or it's not her role. I feel like it's my role. I feel like a lot of us in this room here are white folks who have been in Dubuque for a long time. This is on us. This is on me. This is on all of us who live here in Dubuque. So we got some work to do, and we can do it. It's not hard, and it's actually fun. One of the things that I do is for Greater Dubuque Development, as I lead a focus group on the third night that they do the Distinctively Dubuque program, and we do a quick little 1-hour focus group, and we ask people what they like about Dubuque and what they don't, and what's confusing and what's annoying and what do they miss and stuff like that. You know what I found out a couple weeks ago? We need Indian restaurants. Indian and Pakistani. We need more diverse food. We need more. One of the folks was talking about there's only 2 hairdressers in this town. She can take her black daughter to get her hair cut because nobody else knows how to cut black hair. My God, how hard is this? We can fix this. So anyway, we've got some work to do, but we've got a lot of things that we've identified that we can do. From here today, from the hiring process, from the welcoming process. So I just want to say thank you to all of our sponsors one last time, especially Greater Dubuque Development, who sponsored tonight's session, NICC, Hodge Companies, Cottingham and Butler, the Dubuque Area Chamber of Commerce, John Deere, and Green State Credit Union. Please watch the live stream. Tell people, yep, thank you all. And especially our partner in this whole process, the Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque. We really appreciate the opportunity to work for them. Thank you all for coming tonight. Continue the conversation, and we will be back here for education, this same spot, just to make it easy for you, right? We're going to do in the exact same location on October 27th. It's a Thursday night, 5:30 doors open, 6 o'clock panel. So just to make it easy for everybody, talking about education that night. So please come back then. Thanks for coming tonight. Keep the conversation going.